Welcome to this deep dive. We know a lot of you are really interested in understanding different life experiences. And today, well, we're zeroing in on something that crops up a fair bit,
Hmm.
especially in, discussions about life choices. We're talking about the experience of women who are child-free after 40. It's a topic you hear about in places like, say, the podcast Child-Free by Choice, that whole conversation.
Right. And we're going to explore the research, looking at the advantages that studies often report for women without children, once they've passed that 40 mark.
Exactly. We've got some recent research looking at all sorts of aspects of life for this group.
Yeah, quite compelling stuff, actually. Our mission, if you like, for this deep dive is to really um, pull out the most significant insights, maybe even some surprising facts about the benefits child-free women over 40 often experience.
The idea is to give everyone a more informed perspective on this path.
Precisely, a richer understanding.
Okay, so where should we start? Maybe with something that I think becomes pretty important as we hit our 40s and beyond. Financial freedom.
Ah, yes, the money aspect. It definitely seems to be a major theme in the research. The financial picture often looks quite different for child-free individuals past 40.
How so? What are the numbers telling us?
Well, Pew Research Center data, for instance, shows that for adults 50 and older without kids, a pretty big majority, like 61%, say it's easier to afford the things they want,
61%. Wow.
and 57% find it easier to save for the future. It's not just about being able to save, but potentially how much faster you can build wealth, achieve different kinds of security.
Right, like maybe retiring a bit earlier or having more capacity for things like, I don't know, giving back.
Exactly. Philanthropy, bigger investments, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And when you consider the actual cost of raising kids, I mean, the figures are pretty staggering.
I saw one estimate, I think it was the Child Poverty Action Group. They put it at around 185,000 pounds for single parents, maybe 151,000 pounds for couples just birth to 18.
Precisely. That's a huge amount of money that child-free individuals just don't spend on child rearing.
So those resources can go elsewhere.
Absolutely. Towards more aggressive retirement savings, other types of investments, building that financial independence. It really can change the long-term financial outlook quite dramatically.
And it's not just the day-to-day costs during childhood, is it? I remember reading something about ongoing support for adult children, too.
That's a really key point. Financial experts often highlight that, helping kids out doesn't always stop at 18. It could be help with a house deposit, emergencies, whatever comes up.
Right, another potential cost that child-free people just don't have in their financial planning.
Exactly. It adds another layer of predictability, maybe a bit more security as they get older.
Okay, so the financial side seems quite significant. Let's pivot a bit. What about careers? Professional development after 40?
Yeah, that's another area where the research suggests some clear differences. Often, child-free women have had potentially fewer or different types of career interruptions compared to mothers.
Makes sense.
And that same Pew data we mentioned, it found 44% of adults over 50 without kids felt being childless actually made career success easier.
Easier? Okay. Easier how, though? More time.
More time, definitely, but also perhaps more flexibility. Think about it maybe being more able to take on those really demanding assignments, the ones that need travel or long hours.
Or even relocating for a big promotion, which is much harder with kids in school, right?
Exactly, that flexibility is key. It could mean saying yes to high-visibility projects, taking a sabbatical for personal growth, or even retraining. It opens up paths that might be harder to navigate with major caregiving duties.
And presumably that sustained focus could lead to, well, more senior roles. Or maybe starting their own thing.
Potentially, yes. Without those ongoing childcare demands, there might be more bandwidth, more energy to pursue those top leadership positions or to invest the time needed for entrepreneurship or even going back for an advanced degree.
So it could add up to higher lifetime earnings and maybe just feeling more satisfied with their career overall.
That's what the research suggests, yeah. Sustained professional networking, continuing education, it all contributes. Higher potential earnings, yes, but also perhaps a stronger sense of career fulfillment.
Okay, so we've got finances, career. Let's talk lifestyle, personal freedom. That feels like a big one.
Oh, definitely. This is where the advantages often seem really pronounced, especially after 40. Many parents in that age range might still be deep in the trenches with teenagers or supporting young adults.
Which takes a lot of time and energy.
A huge amount. Whereas child-free women often report having significantly more time flexibility. Remember that Pew stat? 57% of those over 50 without kids said they had more time for hobbies and interests.
More time for themselves, essentially.
Exactly. But it's more than just free time, it's the autonomy. The power to decide how you spend that time without constantly balancing family needs.
Right. Weekends aren't automatically booked up with kids' activities. More spontaneity.
Precisely. You can make more spontaneous decisions, adapt more easily if life throws a curveball. You have the freedom to really pour time into passions. Things like, serious travel, big creative projects, major volunteer commitment.
Things that are just harder to fit in otherwise.
Much harder. The time is just, available in a different way, less constrained.
And it's not just about big chunks of time, is it? It's about structuring your day-to-day life, too.
Absolutely. You can align your schedule more with your own energy, your own preferences. If you want a quiet morning or need to work late creatively, you generally have more control over that. Even small things like deciding on a last-minute weekend trip.
Yeah, less coordination needed.
Much less. And that freedom extends to bigger things, too, like where you live. The research mentioned housing flexibility.
Ah, right. Not tied to school district.
Exactly. That's a huge factor for parents. Child-free women can choose based purely on their own lifestyle preferences. Want a downtown loft, a quiet place in the country, maybe even live nomadically for a bit? The options are wider.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's move into something maybe a bit more complex.
Health, physical and mental well-being.
Right. And the link between parenthood and health isn't always straightforward. But research does point to some potential differences. One very direct one is simply avoiding the physical risks of pregnancy and childbirth itself.
Which shouldn't be underestimated. Pregnancy takes a toll.
It absolutely does. And while, yes, some studies show giving birth might slightly lower risks for certain cancers, it can also increase risks for other things, cardiovascular issues, chronic pain. Plus, complications like preeclampsia or gestational diabetes can have long-term effects.
So avoiding those is a clear physical plus.
It's a distinct advantage, yes. But it also seems to go beyond just avoiding those risks. There's the aspect of ongoing self-care.
Easier to prioritize.
Potentially, yes. With fewer demands on their time and energy, child-free women might find it easier to stick to consistent routines, regular exercise, meditation, getting enough sleep. Things that are crucial as we age, but often get squeezed out by family responsibilities. And mentally, the stress factor must be different.
That's a big part of it. Parenting is rewarding, of course, but it's also undeniably stressful. Research suggests that the absence of those specific stressors, combined with greater autonomy, could contribute to better mental health outcomes for some child-free women.
More space for self-reflection, maybe therapy if needed.
Exactly.
Okay.
More capacity to prioritize their own mental and emotional well-being, engage in personal development. That autonomy is key.
Now, there's this stereotype, isn't there? One that communities like Childfree by Choice often push back against the idea that child-free people, especially women, end up isolated later on. What does the research actually say about social connections?
That's such an important point to tackle because the research actually paints a very different picture. It suggests child-free women over 40 often have really rich social lives and strong community ties.
So the stereotype is often wrong.
It seems largely unfounded, yes, because they often have more time and, frankly, energy to invest deeply in friendships, nurturing those connections.
Being more intentional about it, maybe?
Exactly. More flexibility for regular catch-ups, shared activities, really being present in those friendships. These intentional bonds can become incredibly strong sources of support over the years.
And it's not just one-on-one friendships, right? Community involvement.
Yes, absolutely. Many find a lot of fulfillment through volunteering, getting involved in advocacy, mentoring. It provides purpose, connection with like-minded people. Again, having the time to dedicate to these things is often easier.
Interesting. And the research even touched on romantic relationships. How does being child-free affect those?
Well, the dynamic can be different. Without the whole layer of co-parenting decisions and stresses, the focus in a partnership can sometimes be more purely on the relationship itself, the emotional connection, shared interests, compatibilities as partners.
Less about logistics, maybe more about the connection itself.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
The focus shifts when raising children isn't part of the equation. It allows for a different kind of partnership focus.
Okay, fascinating. Let's look toward the end game then. Planning for later life. This is where people sometimes raise concerns about not having children for support.
And that's a fair point to raise. The research, like that Pew study, acknowledges this. Most childless older adults are aware that having kids might provide a kind of built-in support network later on.
So they know it could be a challenge.
They're aware of it. But interestingly, that awareness often seems to lead to more proactive planning. They tend to be more intentional about figuring out retirement and potential care needs.
Because they know they need to arrange it themselves.
Precisely. And remember the financial advantages we discussed.
Ah, right. It comes back to that.
Exactly. Having potentially significant savings, maybe over £300,000 saved from not raising two kids, hypothetically gives them far more options for later life care. High-quality assisted living, in-home care, whatever they might need or prefer. The financial freedom buys choices.
So the money provides control over how they age.
A great deal of control. And there's also the autonomy aspect. Without adult children whose opinions or needs might influence decisions, they often have more freedom to choose their housing, their healthcare, their lifestyle in later life, entirely based on their own wishes.
Less pressure from family expectation.
Right. More personal autonomy right through the aging process.
Okay, so wrapping this up. It seems the research paints a picture of, well, significant potential upsides for child-free women after 40. We're talking financial security,
Career opportunity,
lifestyle flexibility, that personal freedom,
potential health and well-being benefits,
strong social connections, contrary to the stereotype.
and greater autonomy in planning for later life. It's quite a list.
It really is. And it's important to stress, isn't it, like you hear in those child-free by choice discussions, this isn't about saying one life path is inherently better.
Absolutely not. It's about showing that being child-free is a completely viable, often very fulfilling path with its own unique set of advantages and opportunities, especially apparent after 40.
And maybe just understanding these potential benefits helps everyone, whether they're child-free by choice or circumstance. It kind of validates different ways of living.
Exactly. Recognizing these positives helps challenge old assumptions, maybe helps women feel more empowered in their choices. It contributes to greater life satisfaction when your path is seen as valid and positive.
So perhaps a final thought for our listeners to ponder. Maybe it's about how we as a society are slowly shifting our views on what a fulfilling life looks like.
That's a great point. And how much individual autonomy matters in defining that fulfillment for ourselves. It seems child-free women are often particularly well-placed to really embrace that freedom.
Food for thought, definitely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Hopefully it's given you some new perspectives. If you want to know more, do check out the original research.